All right, so good evening, everyone. Hey, and welcome to the folks that are watching via the interwebs. This is our second Black History Month inspired Bible study here at Wedgewood, and like I said, we celebrate Black people all the time, but since it is Black History Month, we wanted to do something a little special. So last week we had Dr. Nancy Fairley that was with us and sharing, and this week we have Reverend and real soon to be Reverend Dr. Liddell Benson, and so he is going to continue our journey. He's going to be focusing on the work of the great James Cone. So thank you all.
Thank you for being here. Excited about and grateful to have this opportunity. So I'm really excited about engaging the work of James Cone. The book in particular that I'll be lifting up from and thinking with is God of the Oppressed by James Hal Cone. He died this past year, so it feels really important to me to be in this space and kind of reflecting on his work and the status of the world. So it feels really important to think about what it means to think about God starting from the oppressed. And so how I was introduced to James Cone was my grandfather. We called him a philosopher mechanic. That was from Locust, North Carolina, right outside of Charlotte, Midland, North Carolina, small town. And he had this old school bus in his front yard that we called Rusty Bus. And so I wasn't really a grade school student. So one of the things that he would do when I would get in trouble at school was make me read a book from the school bus in his front yard. And then he would test me on it. Some of the hardest tests I've ever taken in my life. And I didn't really realize it because I hated it at the time. It was actually a punishment of some sort. But later on, when I went to undergrad after I got out of the Navy, I was reintroduced to James Cone from one of my undergrad professors, Jennifer Bird, who was actually here a couple years ago. And so I was kind of reintroduced to James Cone, and that kind of actually thrusted me into seminary. Because I'm not sure, well, no, I wouldn't have went to seminary if I hadn't read James Cone prior to that because of my criticisms of religion. So I'm appreciative that I was reading his work, reintroduced to his work at that time. And so one of the questions that I want to reflect on with maybe everyone in this space, why is this idea of God of the oppressed something important that we may need to think about for a moment? Anyone have any thoughts or reflections on that? When you hear God of the oppressed, what do you think?
I think of the whole literature of different parts of the Bible. I mean, it's throughout. Be it the oppression in Egypt, the oppression of Rome over it is the story of God being on the side of the oppressed. And if you read the Bible and can't see that, I don't know that you really read all of the Bible. Right.
Yeah. Any others? Thank you, Vicki. God of the oppressed. So what makes Dr. Cone's work important to me, and what kind of how his work thrusted me into going to seminary in the first place is, prior to that, I had seen very few images of Jesus that looked like anything like me or anybody in my own community. So I was very weary or skeptical. I'm sure I picked that up from my grandfather as well. He was a minister, but was very skeptical of institutional religion and the powers that be that functions within religion. So I was really, really skeptical of institutional religion, and Dr. Cone gave me the permission to critique it and also be a part of it. In a way that I hadn't experienced prior to that. He gave me permission to critique the interpretations of the Bible that I received growing up, and I felt supported in a way going through undergrad, through my seminary training, and I also did some postmaster's work. And it just gave me the permission and okay to say, all right, this doesn't feel right, so let's unpack this and see where this uncomfortable feeling is coming from. So my work has been primarily around liberation theology. Even at a seminary, as I attended seminary that didn't really acknowledge liberation theology in a particular way, but even though I made it present, part of my presence in being in seminary was kind of lifting up that perspective. And I appreciate learning to have to navigate those spaces and also hold a perspective that's very different than the norm within that context. And this is why I feel like I'm a good person to present this work. I've been reading Dr. Cone over and over throughout seminary as a way of, I would say as a way of therapy, because I was really frustrated going through that training, and Dr. Cone gave me a voice, assisted me in finding my own voice, and so I'm thankful for that. And so again, the book that I am primarily pulling from today is God of the Oppressed. When you hear the title of this book, we talked about kind of what that means for us all, kind of thinking about God from the standpoint of those that are struggling, that are traumatized, that are marginalized in our society. So can we maybe just lift up a few experiences that are marginalized in our society? And I think that will help us kind of think about where Dr. Cone is coming from.
Well, the two easiest, I guess, thinking about it in terms of ethnicity, would be, well, three easiest would be historically African American, Black folks, historically Native Indigenous peoples,
right,
and then currently they're not all Native and Indigenous, they have different backgrounds, but largely they're just Native and Indigenous Spanish-speaking people.
Right.
But you could say like South American, Central American immigrants.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Any others?
I think those who educationally don't fit in the norm of what the school system may teach, be it autism, dyslexia, AD, whatever the disability, or I'm not sure it's a disability. It's labeled as such. It's labeled as such, but it doesn't quite meet. They're one mind at a time is not what we educate.
Right. Yeah.
We educate in a system.
Yeah.
Some people fit into it. Some people don't.
Yeah. So, and that brings up some really important conversations. So what does it mean to live inside of a world where our system, our way of life is imagined by those that have the power to make those decisions? So those that have the power to make the decision have imagined a particular way of life, and those that don't live within that particular way of life are marginalized. So how do we think about a God that is present in our life that is not with those in power, but those from the bottom? So what does that mean for us within the church? And what does that call us to do? When we think about healing, when we think about justice, when we think about reconciliation, a lot of these words are kind of thrown around as if as if they have meaning without context. So one of the conversations that I've had recently, oftentimes people love talking about reconciliation. But if we don't talk about the power dynamics within reconciliation, it's not reconciliation. We're kind of just perpetuating the same thing that we've been doing the entire time. Give me 1 second. So a primary piece that I believe must happen to do God's work is knowing yourself. So yeah, I've talked a lot about what does it mean to do theology from the margins. But if you don't even know what your position is in the world, you don't understand your privilege and bias. If you don't understand what kind of privileged power you possess, you can't even begin to imagine what it means to be in solidarity with those on the margins. So I wanna do an activity, a kind of quick activity. It's called a privilege walk. Just so we can acknowledge together our own privilege in the world. And this is an activity. It doesn't acknowledge your full privilege. It doesn't give some kind of conclusive claim about anything. But I want us to begin to think about what kind of privilege we possess and what it means to walk with God of the oppressed. What does it mean to walk with James Cone as he's thinking about the work that he's doing, the academic writings that he's writing within this text. So if we could line up here in the corner.
The corner or on the wall?
Against the wall here.
Okay.
And so, and those, So for those that are, with us from the internet, I'm going to ask some questions, and at least I want you to think about how these questions may connect to you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a statement.
Okay.
And those that are connected to the statement, they either step forward or step back. Yeah, we might want to step in the middle then.
Okay. Yeah. Come on. Everybody go to the middle.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem. So how about, can we, may I adjust it just slightly?
Yes.
Okay. So everybody line up in a straight line like when you used to go on the way to the cafeteria. And so everybody get in a straight line. And then so just tell us right and left. So pick which way you want us to go. So we'll go this way and this way. So like if you benefited, you go one way. So tell us like that way or that way.
Okay.
Just point my right and my left get confused.
Okay, yeah.
That makes sense? Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to ask these questions and respond from the statements that I make. If your ancestors were forced to come to the USA not by choice, take one step right. If your primary ethnic identity is American, take one step left. If you were ever called names because of your race, class, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation, take one step right. If there were people who worked for your family as servants, gardeners, nannies, take one step left.
What was that question again, please?
If there were people who worked for your family as servants, gardeners, nannies, take one step left. If you were ever ashamed or embarrassed of your clothes, house, car, take one step right. If one or both of your parents were white-collar professionals, doctors, lawyers, take one step left.
Did you profess it yet?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
If you were raised in an area where there was prostitution, drug activity, take one step right. If you ever tried to change your appearance, excuse me.
You Yeah, we said that. No, one step right.
You said one step right.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'll just do
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
If you ever try to change your appearance, mannerisms, or behavior to avoid being judged or ridiculed, take one step right. If you studied the culture of your ancestors in elementary school, take one step left.
By the teachers or by who? Like the school did?
Yeah, for the school.
Oh, yeah, no.
If you went to school speaking a language other than English, take one step right. If there were more than 50 books in your house when you grew up, take one step left. If you ever had to skip a meal or were hungry because there was not enough money to buy food when you were growing up, take one step right. If you were taken to art galleries or plays by your parents, take one step left. If one of your parents was unemployed or laid off, not by choice, take one step right. If
Go on.
If you have health insurance, take one step left. If you attended private school or a summer camp, take one step left. If your family ever had to move because they could not afford the rent, take one step right. If you were told that you were beautiful, smart, and capable by your parents, take one step left. If you were ever discouraged from academics or jobs because of race, class, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation, take one step right. If you were encouraged to attend college by your parents, take one step left. If you have a disability, take one step right.
Does that include brain? My brain?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm joking.
They both said yes. Yes.
If you were raised in a single parent household, take one step right. Kind of don't like that question, but if your family owned the house where you grew up, take one step left.
That's a hard one. Maybe.
Because we did some, we did, and then we did.
Yeah.
What's
What's the predominant one?
I'm just going to say right here.
Okay. If you saw members of your class, of your race, ethnic group, gender, or sexual orientation portrayed on television in degrading roles, take one step right. Give me a second. If you own your own car, take one step left. Yeah, good. Oh man, I know that's what I was thinking. If you were ever offered a good job because of your association with a friend or family member, take one step left. If you were ever denied employment because of your race, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation, take one step right. If you were ever if you were paid less, treated less fairly because of your race, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation, take one step right.
You need to add gender identity to that.
Yeah, I was thinking nationality
Yeah, me
too.
too. I was just like, let's just add gender identity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you.
If you were ever accused of cheating or lying because of your race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity, take one step right. If you ever inherited money or property, take one step left.
Does yours count for me?
You inherited like somebody died and they gave it to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you had to rely primarily on public transportation, take one step right. If you attended private school at any point in your life, take one step left. If you were ever stopped or questioned by the police because of your race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, take one step right. If you were ever afraid of violence because of your race, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation, take one step right. If your parents own their own business, take one step left. If you were generally able to avoid places that were dangerous, take one step left. If you were ever uncomfortable about a joke related to race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity, but felt unsafe to confront the situation, take one step right. That question makes sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, we all step in.
If you were ever the victim of violence related to race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, take one step right.
Ask that question again, please.
Yes. If you were ever the victim of violence related to race, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation, and gender identity, take one step right. Got it? Imagine you are in a relationship. If you can get married in the state of North Carolina, take one step left. If your parents did not grow up in the United States, take one step right. If your parents attended college, take one step left. If your parents told you that you could be anything you wanted to be, take one step left. And the last question, if you are able to take a step forward or backward, take two steps left.
Say it again.
Take 2 steps left.
You can walk. I'm out of this room.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you take a moment and just look around? And when you're ready, you can head back to your seats.
Richard Rivers.
Any thoughts or reflections before we move forward?
I guess for me it was interesting to journey away. Like I did a whole lot of journeying to get back to the starting point.
Yeah.
And that just like, I'm like, that is noticeable.
How did it feel?
I knew that was I was looking at you like, Liddell, don't ask me that. I knew it was coming. It felt I'm numb at the moment in my feeling self for other reasons.
Right.
But if I was to let myself feel, it'd be a combination of anger and sadness. But yeah, feel doubt a little bit right now. But yeah, some anger and sadness.
Yeah.
I think about the privileges I had, even though I grew up in rural Appalachia, and much of there's privilege beyond privilege beyond privilege. As my grandmother taught me, there will always be somebody who thinks they're richer than you, someone that thinks they're smarter than you, and someone that thinks they're better than you. Don't you think that about anyone else. And it grounded me, but that was a privilege to have that perspective.
Could you say more about what grounded you, Vicki, if you don't mind sharing?
My grandmother's philosophy of the rain, I mean, she she went from pre-depression, having servants, gardeners, staff, governess, household, to post-depression, living in rural Appalachia while her husband hoboed for work, raising children by herself on a farm in dire poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And so she experienced great wealth and great poverty. And having traveled that spectrum, she taught us to think about it differently, with an empathy and a non-judgmental way, because she had experienced the high and the low. And at different points in time in your life, you can be on different points in that spectrum. Just because you're over here today, to the left or whatever, doesn't mean a tragedy or something doesn't come your way where you're answering those questions very differently.
Now, myself, angry that there's still people that are denying that white privilege even exists, and I found myself angry that affirmative action, which had so many positive impacts for people in our country, is now considered an awful thing.
It's being challenged, but I don't think I think there's still a lot of people who say we need to reflect the society we make up. Just because there's a court system and some people that are challenging it, I don't agree that most people think it's awful.
I didn't say most, but a lot of people do.
Some people do.
A lot of conservative white Republicans do.
I think it's a lot. I hear that. I hear a lot of movies.
I think a lot of people are uneducated about it, and they're choosing to listen, and I have to really guard myself because I was actually telling someone I'm really working hard on my profanity, listening to self-absorbing, narcissistic, jackass in the White House, and to keep myself humble, so I don't want people thinking that I'm so self-righteous. I got caught up in the whole thing of getting him, voting him in office, and if I could take that vote back, and I'm sure if a lot of other people would take their vote back from him, they would. But the thing of the matter is that we got conned into voting this man into office. And if he was good at conning a bunch of white trash to get him into office, then the big fear is that he's going to con a lot of other people into trying to take away a lot of rights that were given to people that long overdue. He might succeed in taking those away. I mean, he's already trying to reverse everything that President Obama spent 8 years putting in for the better of the people of this country, and now it's just like almost from the moment he was in office, he wouldn't take the chance to have anybody vote on anything. It was just executive order after executive order after executive order, and that's the fear that a lot of people have now, is that he's going to wiggle and do whatever plant every deceitful seed that he can to get him in the upper 1%, and a lot of the Republicans and a lot of the prejudice and however you want to call it, they're going to take a lot of good that this country has worked towards to get. They're going to take a lot of that away.
Yeah. So one of the things that I at this moment kind of want us to hold on to for a little bit is what were the privileges and things that were showing up for you, for yourself, in this activity? Yes.
To answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me it's an awareness that, you know, I come from an educated household. Both my parents went to college. My father was killed when I was very young, but both my parents went to college. Now the generation before them, no, right? But like both my parents went to college. So it was expected that I would go to college, like I was open, like, so educational systems have been open to me my whole life, like it was never a question. And luckily, the way I learned fit into the system. So I didn't have to buck against, like, you know, a learning difference. But I'm also aware that, like, my blackness, my femaleness, my queerness, how much that offsets. You know, like I said, like I did all that and started back at the starting point, right? So that I'm aware of that. The other thing I want to say too, with this exercise, is that I think it's you may be getting ready to say something about this, but I'm going to say it if that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's just to make sure that we understand that this exercise is systemic, and so it's not a personal indictment, because if you are that person on either end, you can, and because I've seen this exercise done, I've been a part of a couple of them, that if you are the person on either end, of left or right, or front or back, when I've seen it done, that you can feel, it can elicit shame, and just want to name that it's a systemic discussion, not a discussion of like, you have something wrong with you. That very much is the system, because there's really, like, within the people in this room, there's really no reason why one of us should be on one extreme in terms of our personhoods, while one of us should be at one extreme and one should be at the other, or why I have to work so hard to start at the beginning over and over and over again. So yeah, those are my wants, thoughts to vocalize.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I wanted to. What I was going to say is that oftentimes what happens when we talk about privileges, people see that as something that's negative, and I see it more as a learning opportunity about thinking about what our system does to us all, and how it disconnects us to create relationships in ways that are sustainable, that are healing, that are loving. And I think that's really important to hold in that activity.
I just know that there's been situations where I knew my gut feeling that I got advanced or I got chosen to another position because of someone's prejudice against another individual. I know for certain that I would not have got hired at my last job if I had come in looking more masculine. You know, if I had come in with a haircut like this, I wouldn't have gotten hired. But I came in with, you know, my hair, not to put you on the spot, but pretty much like Vicky's, very feminine, and looked like I worked in a doctor's office. I looked very feminine, and of course after I got hired, a week later I got my hair cut, but then they had already hired me.
Too late now.
But
what you gonna do?
I saw a person like within a year later come in very butch, probably identified as transgender, and I knew as soon as that person walked in that they weren't going to get hired.
You know, I don't feel ashamed of what I do, of my privilege. What I do feel is blinded by it. I'm just so unaware of how other people have to live. And I think that's why it's so important to have many voices in a congregation teaching and preaching, because I don't have a clue. I want to be sensitive and I want to be empathic, but really there's so many things that I can't know because of my privilege. And unless somebody tells me, and I won't even know it in terms of up close and personal, I'll just know it through somebody's story.
Right. Yeah. Any others?
I similar to Malou, ended up with privilege, but I had to take steps back just based on gender and being female in 2019. That's you know, I dealt with that out of college, out of law school 30 years ago, but we're still dealing with it today.
Yeah. So, because of time, I kind of go ahead and move forward, but I want to take a brief moment just to kind of center ourselves and breathe, because I know for myself, I've done this on multiple occasions, and I have to, I mean, it's complicated in so many different ways, thinking about the intersectionalities of oppression and privilege. And it also depends on, context in a lot of ways. If I'm in a space full of black women in particular, there's a different way that my privilege impacts my body. In a different way that I have to kind of think about it and work through. The shame comes up. Like, for me, I often think about, I was birthed from a black woman and raised by black women. How has this privilege impact them? And how does it continue to impact them? And I'm always kind of wondering, how can I imagine something outside of it while also being inside of it? So I just want to take a moment for us to breathe and kind of move through whatever feelings that we're having at the moment. Not saying that they'll go away, just so we can find some ease in whatever's coming up for you at the moment. And just take a deep breath and release whatever you need to. And also holding what you need to. So now I would like to pose a question. Who is Jesus Christ for us today? What does Jesus call us to? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? If we're doing this work of God from the marginalized, God of the oppressed, what does Jesus call us to do? What does it look like, feel like, or smell like? I mean, the first image that came to mind, especially when I say smell like, is the book and film The Color Purple. Running through a field of flowers is kind of what justice feels like to me, but to do the work that I'm imagining, it also doesn't smell good at the same time. So it's shit that I'm running through as well. Yeah.
I'm thinking of that movie, it's called The Help. Where the woman puts shit in that pot.
Two slides hill.
Yeah.
Wow, some shit pot.
Yeah.
So, any others before I keep going? So, in his text, God of the Oppressed, Dr. James Howell Cone challenges us to life with a poor black Palestinian Jew named Jesus. What does it mean to walk with this kind of Jesus? I lifted a quote from the text, and it says, "For Christians who have experienced the extreme absurdities of life, the Christological question is not primarily theoretical, but practical. It arises from the encounter of Christ in the struggle for freedom." And what that means is, if we're going to do, Dr. Cone told us more about like a practice of theology. And it calls for us as a church or religious people or people, human beings in general, to be in solidarity with those at the margins of society. Like, what proximity are we to the people that are on the margins? And what does that mean to worship a poor Palestinian Jew that was crucified, and he would say later in one of his texts, lynched for the work that he was doing in the world? That's a dangerous and scary thought. But I think one of the things that's happening right now, or has been happening for a while when it comes to prosperity gospel and this kind of feel-good theology and religion, that we forget that we worship someone that was lynched because of the work that he was doing in the world. And that requires something of us. That is scary as hell.
Yeah.
So this type of calling requires something of us. See, what Cone is pushing against feels like two things: the white supremacist images of Jesus and the neutral ones. Besides my grandmother's house, I didn't see a black Jesus anywhere, even many of the black churches that I attended. And that impacted my psyche in a particular way. So when we close our eyes, and I'm not even asking for a response, someone says Jesus, what is the first image that comes to your mind? The immediate first image. Not the one that you have to work towards.
Probably the one that we saw in our house every day as we were growing up. Mine is a light of color.
Right.
Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I think we think of the Christmas, and I'm stealing from the movie line, the 6-pound baby Jesus.
Mm.
We like that little
Yeah.
cute Jesus.
When it's swallowed up in a manger.
Yeah.
Swallowed up in a manger. And we don't, that's really cute.
Mm.
Now, Mary, I didn't catch yours. Were we talking about the Lord's Supper Jesus? That famous
Just the images.
That famous
I have one where, I remember one where it was these two children
Okay.
crossing a bridge. And I think the bridge is almost unstable, maybe missing some planks.
Right.
And then there's Jesus
Okay.
behind them, helping them cross.
Okay.
I remember it in one of my households growing up.
Yeah.
I was thinking of that Lord's Supper of white Jesus, and it was really odd. This wonderful elderly African American couple gave me that white Jesus from the Lord's Supper. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And they came to church and wanted to know where their painting was.
Yeah.
How would we display
And
it?
I was just going, I don't want to put white Jesus up. I just want to disappoint them. But
Yeah.
I had trashed white Jesus.
Yeah. And even, I mean, that's not the image that comes up immediately for me anymore. But there's still something about those other 30, 31 years that image was ingrained in my head. And how that impacted the way that I lived. Like how my relationship with white people, my white teachers, the way that I folded under when my teachers would walk in front of me, the way that I bit my tongue. I'm convinced that had that kind of continual image of Jesus influenced the way that I moved in the world. And I would also argue that influences the way that everybody moves in the world. At least thinks about Jesus and how what Jesus' call means for us in the world. And so while thinking about that, I also want you to hear James Cone's voice and how he articulates what he's doing with his theology. And also kind of a funny piece is, I told you that I read Dr. Cone really early in my life. And so in my mind, he had this really strong voice. Dr. Cone's from the country. He has a strong Southern accent. It makes it more powerful for me now, but I remember the first time hearing his voice, I laughed. Because it's not the voice that I expected. But it also, I want everybody to hear his voice and how he articulates it.
So,
Professor James Cone, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you.
What did you draw on to do your theology? As a professor, as an author?
It was trying to bring together Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement together with the Black Power Movement, this symbol of being black in a white racist society. King interpreted the gospel in such a way in which the blackness of his identity was not at the center. Malcolm, a Muslim, rejected Christianity because it did not address his blackness. So, I wanted to address my blackness, but yet at the same time, I was a Christian. I was born a Christian. I couldn't leave that. That faith was the center of my life. But the way in which that faith had been interpreted in the seminary and also generally in the dominant interpretation of it in America, which King largely adopted, also had a white Jesus. Now, you don't get a European white Jesus in Palestine. You can't get that. But with white theologians, you can get almost anything out of Jesus. So they had reinterpreted Jesus so he looked like them. So I wanted to bring the blackness of my identity together with the faith that I had learned in the church. And it was that brought me to want to interpret the Christian gospel. So, in black theology, which I developed, the blackness in that phrase comes from Malcolm X. The theology in it comes from Martin King. So I bring Martin and Malcolm together, the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement together in order to develop a black theology of liberation.
In our culture today, there are a number of prominent authors who say that religion is a primary cause of violence. In fact, it's almost too dangerous to be tolerated. Do you see a connection between religion and violence?
I do see a connection between religion and violence, but I see that connection largely in terms of many people who are religious are the victims of violence, like black people, and they have used religion in order to respond to that violence. And that's what the civil rights movement was, using religion in order to empower poor black people to resist violence. But dominant religion is always explicitly violent against people who have no power. Any religion that's in the hands are the instruments of those who are in power, militarily, economically, and politically, and religiously. If they are the dominant group, like white people are in this country, religion is going to be violent. But that's true anywhere in the world. I've been around the world. Anywhere religion has been in the hands of those, as instruments of those who are in power, religion is violent. But for those who are the victims, religion can often be used as a means of resisting the very violence in which that is being inflicted on them.
I'd like to stay with the violent side for a minute.
All right.
For those in power, does it seem violent? I mean, there are certainly people who say, for my religious convictions, I am now going to inflict violence and feel empowered by that. But I think you're talking about people who might not see themselves as violent.
Yes, I mean, most of the people who were very religious in the South, where I grew up, did not see themselves as violent. They interpreted violence with the Ku Klux Klan. They didn't see segregation as violent. They saw segregation as a way of life. But any dominant group in any society that's making the rules and the regulations and by which that society is run, they are being violent against those who have no say in what those rules will be.
Is there a way that religion specifically feeds that? Because that could go with power in general, couldn't it?
Yes, it could go, but religion is never completely separated from power. You don't get pure religion. You always get religion connected with the people. And you have to ask yourself, what position do they have in the society? Are they the ones that make the rules by which the society is organized? If they use religion for that, and if they are religious, they will use religion for that. So anybody who has any group that has institutional power, they are violent. Therefore, the mainline denominations in this country have been violent against black people. And I can show you that from the time of about the 17th, 18th, 19th century, all the way down into the 21st century. If you are part of the dominant group in this society, you are being violent.
Now, you use the term white supremacy to describe not a Ku Klux Klan idea, but the state of affairs in our country today.
Yes.
Could you talk about that?
White supremacy is white people making all the rules and regulations by which this country is defined. There is one black senator of the 50 who are there. There is only one. That's white supremacy. There is the, 9 Supreme Court justices. All of them white as far as I'm concerned. One may look black, but he's white. So that's what I mean by white supremacy. That is white people's rules and regulation defining how the community and the society.
Yeah, so if we could break up in two groups, I would love for us to have a conversation about what Dr. Cone just said. Get 3 minutes. So if we could, right here, yeah. If y'all can have a conversation and then we'll finish it up.
Ready to have a conversation.
We got 3 minutes.
3 minutes. I love what he said about there are 9, all white Supreme Court justices as far as I'm concerned. With Clarence Thomas, I'm like, oh, that was not funny and African American, Arabic, etc. was the first breakthrough that I felt some positive thing about. It's a pleasure to have that. That's a man's way to say it.
I'm so glad to see too many African
If we could come together as a group, please. One of the things that I hope that you heard from Dr. Cohn within the video is that he's doing theology from the standpoint of black people, the black experience. What does it mean to do theology from the standpoint of those on the margins, black people on the margins trying to pursue freedom and liberation in the world? And so within your groups, were there some particular ideas or thoughts that came up during your group time?
We spoke about the definition of white supremacy. What we heard tonight was kind of mind-blowing for me. And it was kind of eye-opening.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. You want to say more about that?
There's probably a lot of things that we've known our whole life, but then when you hear it, it sort of...
Yeah.
Well, I had always thought that in the last 20 years, the United States has really come much further in the last 20 years than it has all of my life. Especially the last 10 years, with Obama being president and bringing around some major changes in this country. Not enough changes, but major changes. The way we see black folks, black politicians in leadership positions. For me, I'm speaking for myself. I thought it was the most fabulous thing that he won the election. But the definition of white supremacy being the majority of the laws in this country, or even the companies that are run, if the leadership is a majority white, then that's white supremacy. It doesn't matter if there's one or two African American or people of color on the board of a company or in the government, cabinet heads. It's white supremacy. So basically, based off his definition, the current administration would be considered white supremacy.
So I think I'm wondering the possibility of holding both, because there is something beautiful and powerful. Well, at least for me, to see to watch Obama in the White House and his family. There was something powerful about that, and that he was functioning within the white supremacist system. How can we hold both and engage both? Feels really important about how we can imagine community together and move forward. If we can't hold both, because one of the things that I've had to learn is how to hold joy, because I can easily be pissed, but it's not sustainable. I can't survive being pissed all the time. But yeah, so it was okay for me to say it was beautiful seeing Michelle and Barack in the White House and their children, just beautiful and powerful, and he still function within a white supremacist society.
It did not end white supremacy.
Yeah.
And it was so cool. What it also makes me think about is Chris's statements. And he said it a couple of times, but I don't know if people have heard it. To put it in context with James Cone. Like Chris will say, and people chuckle, that he felt like an old white male heterosexual father shouldn't be in leadership in Wedgewood. If you put it in the context of taking what happens on the macro scale to the micro, then in essence, what Chris is saying is, I don't want Wedgewood to be a white supremacist institution, like as much as possible. Now, granted, again, even if we change things here, we're still functioning within. We can't be absolved of our context. Like, we don't leave it all when we walk in here. Sometimes I wish we could. But yeah, just that, I'm like, oh, I wonder if that message is really translating of like how intensely Chris has been saying this and set this foundation in his mind long before I came along. Like, he was thinking and wanting this long before there was ever a Malou that stepped foot in the church, long before there was a Liddell that stepped foot, in this church. So yeah, just thinking about what that vision and hearing it anew through the lens of James Cone.
Yeah. It seems to me that James Cone says rightly, we have no choice. I mean, this is Jesus. And you can draw on Jesus any way you want to, but that's not the way Jesus is. And Jesus is a black Jesus. And if you're that white, old, or heterosexual, you can't just keep doing what you're doing.
You can't just keep Scandinavian Jesus up there.
Yeah.
Just one, and I didn't mention this in our group, but just 100 counties in North Carolina, 6 sheriffs who are African.
Right, there you go. In 2019. 2019, right.
And that just happened this year.
Right, just got to 6.
We just got to 6.
Yeah.
So 6 out of 100 is definition of white supremacy.
Yes.
Definitely.
But that was, the 6 just made it this year, guys.
Yes.
So we have a long way to go.
Yeah. And also a piece that I want us to really think about is like, So we live in a society that was imagined from a kind of a white mind, and the other people that moved into the society or were forced into the society either have to assimilate, find ways of resisting, or accommodate in a lot of a certain way that find ways to resist, hold joy, and also struggle for liberation. I think that's something really important to hold on to about the system and what it means to live within that system and have to make certain choices. And certain people with privilege don't have to make certain choices, and those that don't have the privilege have to figure out a way to navigate the space. So we're running out of time, but we're out of time. Okay.
But that's a compliment to you that nobody is complaining. But I'm just saying, right? Like, take it as a compliment.
Any questions that you
we want you to come back.
Okay.
Please.
Any questions or thoughts before we close up?
Thank you. That's about thank you.
I like that you showed his voice in him, because I, like you, imagined something different.
James Earl Jones voice,
Right.
Yeah. And then when he starts talking, you're like, oh my God, if that ain't my uncle or somebody I heard,
It was, his thinking is just phenomenal.
Yeah, I'd be interested in, I'm always asking, Liddell, what are you reading? And for everybody here and those in internet land, are there a couple books, Cone's book you'd recommend, and maybe a few other authors or whatever you want?
Of Cone's, they had a recent book come out called, that one, God of the Oppressed. Black Liberation, Black Theology and Black Power, which was his first text. The Crosses and Lynching Tree was
the cross and the lynching tree. That's that'll get you.
They had his recent one. He told his story. Wow, and I read it too.
I've read it, but it's good.
Well, just text it to me, and then we'll get it out to the people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, all of his books.
Well. Right, all of it.
Yeah, all of it.
So,
is it said I wasn't gonna tell?
Yeah, said I wasn't
gonna tell nobody. Amen.
Yeah.
Well, no. So I just want to thank you so much. He's like my big little brother. I love you and I'm grateful. Thank you for bringing this to us, and we will definitely have you back. if you'll come, we'll
Yeah,
have you.
Okay.
All right, so thank y'all on the interwebs.